Welcome to Module 10, Writing. There are 4 components to language: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. We're going to explore how reading, listening, and speaking support the writing process. Although we've addressed in this training reading before writing, that doesn't necessarily mean that reading will always be the primary goal for a learner. You may have a learner whose goal it is to write a resume and a cover letter, or to write their life story. Reading would be part of that work, but the emphasis would be on writing. During this presentation, we will identify 2 components of writing, learn to use a 5-step writing process with learners, identify strategies and activities to use with learners to improve writing, and learn to adjust writing activities for beginning or advanced writers. We can think of writing as having 2 components, composition and mechanics. Writing composition consists of the skills, strategies, and processes that a writer uses to get his or her ideas in print. It often involves brainstorming what you want to say, organizing ideas so that they make sense, creating drafts and revising them, providing enough detail to convey the message, and choosing words that keep the reader interested. Later in this module, we'll discuss a 5-step writing process that will make composition easier for learners, along with activities that will help them improve organization, level of detail, and word choice in their writing. Writing also involves mechanics such as handwriting, spelling, and following grammar rules about things like capitalization, punctuation, parts of speech, noun-verb agreement, and the use of apostrophes. People often think that beginning learners need to focus on the mechanics of writing. They can work on composition later. Learners often think of writing this way and will explain that they need to learn to spell better as a way to improve their writing. They may be correct. They do need to work on their spelling, but spelling does not need to be a barrier to writing. Many people do not like to write or certainly don't feel like they're confident writers. Here are some common reasons why someone may not want to write. They don't know all the grammar rules. They can't spell. They don't know what to say. They may think they have nothing to write about, or they don't know how to say what they want. They may not want someone else to be able to read their thoughts. They might think it takes too long to write. They might think it's boring. They might feel it's too much pressure. Can you think of some other reasons? How about your own past experience? They may be used to getting back papers that were full of red pen corrections, and that can stay with someone. There's lots of reasons someone may not want to write. And one of the reasons that someone may not want to write is not because they're no good at it. They might have a lot to say. They might have very interesting stories to tell. We will use a 5-step process as a starting point for working with learners on their writing. Some published materials may present a slightly different process, and that's okay. The important thing is to have a consistent process that learners can use and that follows the same basic order: pre-writing, first draft, revising, editing, and final draft. So let's take a look at pre-writing. This is the first step in the writing process. In it, learners decide what to read about and brainstorm their ideas. This is probably the most important step in the writing process, but it's also often the step that teachers and learners pay the least attention to. We want to emphasize that the more time spent in the pre-writing step, the easier the remaining steps will be. Ideas may come from conversation between you and the learner, a practical need, or thoughts generated from reading. Mind mapping may be a good way to organize ideas generated in this step. The first draft. The first draft is a learner's first attempt to give structure to his or her ideas. For the first draft, the focus is on the message rather than on the punctuation, spelling, grammar, or handwriting. It's not even necessary for the first draft to contain complete sentences. A learner who has difficulty with a word or phrase can guess, draw a symbol, ask for help. Revise. This is where the learner works to clarify and expand the content. You can help by asking the learner to read his or her first draft and then asking questions about it. Read the piece aloud yourself and ask the learner to listen critically. Edit. This is where the learner makes improvements in the mechanics. spelling, punctuation, and grammar. The amount of editing will depend on the learner's level and the purpose of the piece. Final draft. This is where the learner publishes what they have written. Publishing means creating a clean copy of a piece and then using it or sharing it with others. Publishing might mean sending off a resume and a cover letter to a potential employer, or putting envelopes with the birthday party invitations in their daughter's backpack to deliver to her friends at school. Publishing is very important because it represents the end of the writing process. Learners may go through the revise and edit cycle several times. Without publishing, revising and editing can become an endless loop. So I'm going to review with you 2 writing activities, one for higher level learners and one for lower level learners, but both will use the writing process. The first activity is called Unnamed Food Activity. You're going to start by asking your learner to turn to a new page in their notebook. Ask them to think of a food. It can be any food, but preferably something they enjoy making and eating. Ask them to write the name of their food in the middle of the page and then draw a circle around it. Then ask your learner to write the word ingredients somewhere on the page, draw a circle around it, and then use a line to connect it to the food. Now ask them to think about the actual ingredients. And they're going to write the ingredients around the word ingredients, connecting them to the ingredient circle with a line. Now, remember, some people may have chosen a food that doesn't have ingredients. Maybe they picked an apple. Instead of ingredients, they could think about the different parts of an apple: the peel, the core, the seeds, the stem. Give them a couple of minutes to finish this step. Next, ask your learner to write the word prepared somewhere on the page and circle it. Ask them to think about the steps they need to take in order to prepare the food. Are things chopped, mashed, sliced, shredded? Do they have to combine ingredients? Are things mixed together or assembled? Have your learner write the steps around the prepared circle and then circle each of the steps and connect each one to the prepared circle with a line. If your learner picked something like an apple, they can identify all the different ways that an apple can be prepared. It can be sliced, it can be put in a pie, it can be mashed as applesauce. Next, we're going to focus on the senses. Ask your learner to write the word senses somewhere on the page. Extending out from that word, they will write each of the senses: looks, smells, sounds, feels, tastes. Give them examples such as the sizzling sound and the smell of burnt sugar as a pie bakes and overflows the pie pan. Have your learner think about their food and write their thoughts around the various senses. Finally, you're going to ask your learner to write the word enjoy on the page. Circle it and connect it to the food circle. Ask them to think about why they enjoyed this food. The reason may relate to the senses, how it smells or tastes, or maybe they like it because it's easier to make than some others, or maybe because their grandmother taught them how to make it. Have them write the thoughts as to why they enjoy it around the word enjoy. Once they finish this, let them know what they've done is created a mind map. This is a great tool to brainstorm and organize thoughts before you start to write, which is where the next step comes in. On a fresh sheet of paper, they're going to use the mind map to write descriptions of their food without naming the food. But before we get to the next part of the unnamed food activity, we're going to take a look at this activity. Let's look at this poem. I'll read it out loud. Sal, Mexican brave, hardworking, hopeful, son of Ben and Bella, brother of Carmen, Victor, and Martin, who feels glad to be here, who likes sunny days, who needs family, friends, and work, who lives in Dallas, Texas. Castro. In this poem, we've learned a lot about Sal Castro. Looking at the poem, we can see what he likes, what he needs, what he feels. He likes sunny days and needs his family and friends and his work. He feels glad to be here in Dallas, Texas. He describes himself in the poem using adjectives: Mexican, brave, hardworking, and hopeful. We learn who his family is, his parents, and 3 siblings. The My Poem activity is another good activity to do with your learner. The prompts help them know what kind of words to include on each line. What do you like? What do you need? How do you feel? What words would you use to describe yourself? My poem may be something like this. Carol, sand between my toes, sunny days, dogs lying by my side. Books, cozy blankets, and strong tea. Time alone, spent in silence, family and friends, calm, hopeful, energized, ready to embrace life's challenges and opportunities. We're going to think about the last 2 activities. In the activity, the unnamed food, how do you think using the writing process would make it easier or more difficult for you to write? Do you think that the writing would be more descriptive or less descriptive because of this process? And what about using the mind map? Did you enjoy that? In the activity, My Poem, do you think having prompts helped? Do you think the outcome would have been the same, easier or harder if I had just said, write a poem about yourself? Think back to the reasons people give for not liking to write. How do you think those 2 activities address those reasons? We're going to take a look at some strategies for writing. Research shows that there are specific instructional strategies that can have a great impact on the quality of a learner's writing. They include process writing. We've already discussed why process is important, and you've experienced the effects of process writing firsthand. Having a consistent process that learners can use when writing results in a consistently higher quality product. The process provides learners with a way to start when they are unsure of what they want to say. It also allows them to focus their efforts on smaller components of writing, improving each component. Strategy instruction. When you teach learners strategies for writing, revising, and editing their work, they can draw upon these strategies when writing on their own. The ability to effectively use strategies helps change a learner's self-image from poor writer to competent and capable writer. Examples of strategy instruction would include teaching a learner to brainstorm ideas about one small part of a topic at a time to improve description and detail, or to edit their writing beginning with the last sentence and working back to the beginning so they accurately read what's on the page. Summarization. Teaching learners to write a summary of what they have read improves writing as well as reading comprehension. Summarization specifically helps with learners' ability to organize their writing and provide explanation and detail. Collaborative writing. This is harder because we teach one-to-one. Learners will rarely have a chance to work with another learner, but it may happen. However, you can also be their partner. Writing collaboratively can improve the overall quality of a learner's writing. In addition to the benefits of other people's feedback in the revising and editing stages, collaborative writing removes much of the pressure learners feel about thinking of something to say. Setting specific product goals. Understanding the purpose for writing improves the learner's ability to write effectively. It is important for learners to have clear, specific goals and to understand how the writing will ultimately be used. For example, in the unnamed food activity, knowing that you needed to describe your food well enough for someone else to identify it probably impacted what you chose to focus on. You would want to choose details that are specific to that particular food. Word processing. Teaching learners to write using computers and word processing programs and other tools is helpful. These tools often make it easier for learners to revise and edit their drafts and to proof for correct spelling and sentence structure. Sentence combining. Teaching learners to combine simple sentences into compound or complex sentences can have a significant impact on the quality of their writing and can also improve their reading skills. Pre-writing. As we've mentioned earlier, this is a very important step in the writing process. Learners often think that good writers just sit down and start writing. Teaching them that brainstorming and planning are important and providing them with the tools and strategies they can use to do so improves their overall writing. It's especially important to emphasize how vital pre-writing is with learners who will be taking timed tests like the GED. When time constraints are introduced into the writing process, the pre-writing step often suffers. When this happens, the quality of the learner's final product will also suffer. Inquiry activities. In inquiry activities, learners are presented with data. They analyze that data, draw conclusions, and then write about those conclusions. For example, you might put several objects in boxes where the learner can feel the object but not see them. The learner would write about their touch observations, and then they'd be given a chance to discuss their observation, touch the objects again, and refine their descriptions. The cycle of continuous inquiry, discussion, and writing results in a narrower focus and increased specificity of detail in the writing. Models. Studying models is a good way to introduce learners to different writing genres. Discuss the different elements, patterns, and forms of the writing model or models, and then do a critical analysis of how effectively they were executed. Examples of models might include poems for creative writing, biographies to help learners write their own stories, resumes and cover letters for job-related writing, absentee notes for real-world writing, or 5-paragraph essays for learners preparing to take the high school equivalency exams. A note about grammar. Understanding grammar rules is important for writing high-quality work. However, writing instruction that emphasizes grammar or treats it as something independent from composition can have a negative overall effect on the quality of a learner's writing. Effective grammar instruction involves the practical application of grammar rules to what the learner is writing. It is part of the editing process and the effort to improve the final product. In other words, let learners write. See what elements of grammar they are having trouble with, and then give them the rules to fix those specific problems. Handwriting. Now that we have learned about the writing process and some strategies for teaching composition, we'll learn how to teach learners the mechanics of writing. Some tutors may work with low-level writers who will need to begin with basic handwriting instruction. Here are some strategies to use with learners to help them learn handwriting. You can provide them with a handwriting chart. Keep a handwriting chart available and visible to learners when they're working on any writing activity, and make sure each learner has a copy for home. Preferably, the chart will show the pencil's directions as the letters are formed. We've included one on the resource page for you. You're going to progress from large motor to small motor skills. Learners who haven't done a lot of writing may not have the fine motor skills needed to write legibly in a small space while holding a small pencil. Begin by having learners use their arms and hands to write the letters in the air. Next, have them write the letters on the top of a desk using their fingers. Or put salt into a rim tray and have them draw the letters in the salt. From there, you can have learners use pencils to write the letters on unlined paper. And then finally, you can have them trace the outline of the letters on lined paper and then write them independently. So you see, we're going to go from very large to very small. And we're going to start with printing. Print is easier to learn and closely resembles the text that learners see in books and online. Start with letters that the learner needs or wants to learn. Written letters do not need to be taught in the alphabetical order. Letter formation is better taught in the context of what the learner needs to write or by grouping letters that are formed with similar motions. And finally, copy. After a learner can form letters, move on to copying words and sentences. The learner can copy vocabulary words, sentences from the story, or a story that he or she dictated and you wrote down. Copying activities should be short and should be related to a learner's needs or goals. Spelling. Remember, one of the reasons people don't like to write is that they're not confident in their ability to spell words correctly. Much of the insecurity around spelling can be addressed by teaching learners to listen for and recognize specific spelling patterns. For instance, single-syllable words with long vowel sounds that are likely use the consonant vowel silent E pattern, and then using these words when they write. However, there will be some words that learners have difficulty spelling for whatever reason. When this happens, you can use a multisensory technique for teaching them to spell these difficult words. The multisensory technique is effective because it encourages learners to use as many senses as possible, increasing the likelihood that they will remember how to spell the word. So how do you take a multisensory approach? You're going to follow these steps. Look at the word, say the word. Note the parts that are written the way they sound. Note the parts that are not written the way they sound. Note any special points to remember. Say the word again. Say the letters in sequence as you look at the word. Say the letters in sequence as you trace them. Look at the word. Say it again. Close your eyes and see the word in your mind. Spell the word aloud as you see it in your mind. Write the word without looking at the model. Check to see if you are correct. We'll now use the technique we just discussed to learn to spell the word separate. Ask the learner to look at the word separate. Ask the learner to say the word separate together with you. Separate. Ask the learner which parts of the word are written the way they sound. Explain that it might be helpful to think in terms of syllables or to look for smaller words they recognize within the larger words. Ask the learner which parts of the word are not written the way they sound. Learners may point out the silent E at the end. Ask the learner if there are any special aspects of the word that will help them remember how to spell it. Explain that many people have trouble remembering where the E's and the A's go. Point out that in the word separate, the E's are separated by the A's. Ask the learner to say the word again. Ask the learner to say each letter while looking at the word. You can point to each letter as the learners say it. Ask the learner to say the letters in sequence again as they trace them. Explain that learners can use their fingers to trace the letters on the table. Ask the learner to say the word again. Ask the learner to close their eyes and picture the word in their mind. Ask the learner to keep their eyes closed and spell the word aloud as they see it in their mind. Ask the learner to open their eyes and write down on a piece of paper what the word is. Ask the learner to check the word that they spelled with the correct spelling of the word. Check in with the learner, see if the process was helpful. Did they get it right? If not, you can address where they got it wrong and possibly start all over from the beginning. What is a sentence? Good question. Before you saw this slide, would you have been able to identify the parts of a sentence? A sentence includes these three elements. Subject. That tells who or what the sentence is about. The complete subject contains a noun or pronoun and all the words that help describe it. Predicate. That tells what the subject does or is. The predicate is the verb and all the words that describe the verb. A complete thought. The sentence must contain a complete thought. One error learners often make is writing sentence fragments. A sentence fragment is missing one of these three elements. On the right side of the slide, we see three sentence fragments. Let's see what pieces of the sentence we are missing. The people in the back of the line. This sentence fragment is missing a predicate that tells what the people in the back of the line did. Maybe the people in the back of the line grumbled with impatience. When they realized that the doors had opened. What is it missing? This fragment has a subject, they, and a predicate, realized that the doors had opened. But it's not a complete thought. When they realized that the doors had opened, they breathed a sigh of relief. Rushed to the gates on Main Street. What is this missing? It's missing the subject. We do not know who rushed to the gates. It could be that the anxious teenagers rushed to the gates on Main Street. Once learners can consistently write complete sentences, we can work with them on writing better sentences. Combining sentences. We're going to discuss 2 activities that can help learners to write better sentences. Teaching learners to combine sentences will have a significant impact on the quality of their writing. We'll do this using the learner's own words and writing. Step 1. I might ask a learner how she likes to start her day. After she tells me, I would ask her to write the information down in short sentences, like the one on the right. Alternatively, I would ask her to tell me short sentences, and then I could write the sentences down and she could copy them. Next, I would show her examples of simple sentences that have been combined into compound or complex sentences. We would talk about the structure of the combined sentences, identifying the parts of the simple sentences, compound subjects and objects, and connecting words and phrases. Let's look at the examples on the right-hand side of the slide. You might say, I drink coffee, I read the news, I eat a bagel, I talk with my family. You could combine those 4 sentences into 2 better sentences. Those sentences are shown on the slide as well. The first one is, I start my morning with coffee and a bagel. How do we combine the sentences? In this case, by creating a compound object, coffee and a bagel. In the second example, we combined I read the news and I talk with my family into a new sentence. I like to read the news or talk with my family. We combine them using the linking word or. Let's hear it for the fanboys. Fanboys is actually an acronym to help learners and yourself remember key linking words. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Sentence building. This is another exercise that can help learners to write better sentences. You're going to ask your learner to write a 5-word sentence. Before they start writing, point out that there are a few rules to follow. They have to have a noun, an action verb, and an object. It should not include any proper nouns, pronouns, or prepositions. The example we show is the boy threw the ball. It could be the dog ate the homework, or the girl drew a picture. Well, let's go with the boy threw the ball. Next, we're going to ask the learner to add an adjective to each noun. The tall boy threw the red ball. Next, we're going to ask the learner that we want to ask the learner to add an adverb. An adverb tells how something was done and may end in ly. The tall boy gently threw the red ball. So now you're going to explain to them that you want them to add a prepositional phrase to the sentence and rewrite it. A prepositional phrase might tell where or when something was done. The tall boy gently threw the red ball to the girl. Finally, explain that now they're going to add another adjective to each noun and rewrite the sentences. Remember, there are now 3 nouns in the sentence, the 2 original nouns and the new noun in the prepositional phrase. The new sentence would be that new sentence could look like the tall blonde boy gently threw the soft red ball to the smiling girl. And if you've taken notes, that is fabulous. But of course, we are going to have a handout for these activities for you as well. Now, let's take a look at correcting grammar. We said earlier that effective grammar instruction involves the practical application of grammar rules to what the learner is writing. Now we'll look more deeply at what that actually means. First, we must base grammar instruction on the learner's gaps in knowledge. In other words, we teach grammar rules that he or she doesn't know or has trouble with, and we don't teach the things that the learner already knows. How do we know what a learner knows and doesn't know about grammar? Well, we're going to get them to write. This means we won't start teaching grammar until we have a body of writing from the learner that allows us to see where they need instruction. This will require 3 to 5 writing activities. If you're working with a beginning level learner who has trouble writing, you might do a series of language experience activities to gather the body of work that you need. We'll talk about this technique later on, but in a nutshell, in this technique, the learner dictates a story to you. The tutor writes the story down exactly as it's dictated. You're not going to add in any corrections, any extra punctuation. It's going to be exactly as the learner dictated it to you. And that story is going to be the basis for the lesson. Since the story is written exactly as the learner says it, you can identify the grammar issues. For instance, with noun-verb agreement, endings of words, run-on sentences, or sentence fragments. We will teach grammar using the direct instruction model. In this model, we explain the grammar rule and how to apply it. We provide examples of the application of the rule and also provide examples of common errors and how to fix them. We're going to provide guided practice with worksheets and examples from the learner's own work. And we're going to have the learner edit future writing for that specific grammar rule. When explaining a grammar rule and how to apply it, it's important to simplify the rule as much as possible. Remember, one of the reasons people do not like to write is the perception that there's a lot of rules that they don't know and will have trouble remembering and following. I'll show you an example of this on the next slide. During the modeling process, it's also important to show the learner common errors related to the grammar rule and how to fix them. By common errors, we mean errors that everyone makes, but also errors that this particular learner makes. Using grammar worksheets is a good way for learners to practice applying a grammar rule. Again, worksheets should test the basics. Adding questions or examples from the learner's own writing to the worksheet can also be helpful. Finally, after the learner understands the rule and how to apply it, we will ask him or her to look for and correct that specific grammar issue during the editing phase of the next 2 or 3 writing assignments that they do. We want learners to focus on correcting at most 2 or 3 types of errors while editing. The rationale behind focusing on a small numbers of errors is that once they consistently recognize these errors and are able to fix them, he or she will stop making them when writing. And then we can move on to the next grammar issue. So let's take a look at forming possessives. This is an example of how to keep grammar rules simple. Point out that there are only 3 rules. These rules are stated simply and shown with examples. The slide also shows 2 common errors and how to correct them. We will provide this information to learners and then give them worksheets on which they could practice applying the rules. We might also want to create worksheets that incorporate examples of the learner's own writing. After a learner has successfully applied the rules for forming possessives to the questions on the worksheet, we would focus on possessives during editing of the next 2 or 3 of the learner's compositions. We might ask the learner to edit for possessives by checking for 3 things. Did I properly use apostrophes to show possession with nouns? Did I properly use possessive pronouns without apostrophes? Did I make nouns plural without using apostrophes? We have a handout on writing, and in it there's a section called Grammar Resources. Like many learners, you and I may have gaps in our grammar knowledge. So these resources can help you fill in those grammar knowledge gaps. Many of our resources also have grammar exercises that you can use with learners. Okay, we are now at the end of this module. Let's review what we've learned in this presentation. We've learned the two components of writing, composition and mechanics. We've looked at why the writing process is useful because it makes higher quality writing possible. The process provides learners with a way to start writing when they are unsure of what they want to say. It also allows them to focus their efforts on smaller components of writing, improving each component. It saves many of the unpleasant aspects of writing, grammar, for the end of the process so that they do not interfere with the creative aspects of writing. We looked at how to work with beginners and what we could do to make writing activities more accessible to them. We can give them sentence starters, or we can ask them specific questions. If they can't write yet, they can dictate it to us, and we can write it down for them. And finally, we looked at effective writing strategies for improving a learner's writing. That includes process writing, strategy instruction, summarization, collaborative writing, setting specific product goals, word processing, combining sentences, pre-writing, using inquiry activities, and providing models. We appreciate your time and interest in learning about writing. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to the tutor coordinator at your council, or you can reach out to us here at Laubach Literacy New Brunswick. Thank you and have a great day.